Hello. Oh, sounds good. Hi, everybody. Good morning. John Kuchta. I'll introduce myself in a moment. Thanks for coming. Today we're going to talk about API design principles, considerations for massive scale. First, hi. I've been with Meraki for a few years now. I'm a product architect on the API PM team. So I help with both the design of the APIs, but also the cross-platform initiatives, that is the initiatives across the rest of Cisco, working with Catalyst Center, vManage, other groups, to make sure that our API experiences are robust and also intuitive. So consistency across those products is one of my projects. I've been in IT network management for more than 13 years, and I am really excited to talk to you about some of the principles that we're putting into the Meraki APIs that I hope can be both informative to you if you're already using Meraki and you want to just develop more efficiently using our APIs, so show you some of the new things that we've got coming out and that have already been released, but also some principles that you can incorporate into your own software development practices, whether you are a network engineer writing some scripts or you are actually a full-blown software development partner. So please do feel free to join the WebEx app. There is a room for this, so if you have any questions, follow-up questions, it's going to be moderated until the 7th. So any questions that come to mind afterward, I'm happy to answer those. I will definitely be engaging. Please do feel free to join. So first we're going to talk about I'll just introduce the concepts and we'll get into what they actually mean. So why are we talking about it? First of all, scalable solutions are the only type of solutions. If it doesn't scale, it's not really a solution, right? And when you're building better software, you have happier customers. We've learned this the nice way and the hard way, right? But that software doesn't have to be a full-blown application. It doesn't even have to have a graphic interface. This can be software that you're using only internally. It can be a script that you just hack together in Python. It does not have to be something super elegant, but the fact is that the better it is, if you just incorporate some simple practices into that development from the get-go, you will be a better developer, and the people who have to work with your applications will be happier for it. Also, reflection is really important to us. When we get feedback, candid, positive, negative, or whatnot, this is something we need to incorporate back into the process, and it's something that we hope you do too. Especially as even if you're just a independent contributor network engineer working with other teams and sharing the applications that you've built, if they're giving you candid feedback about what they expect and kind of where the pain points are, that's something that is really valuable feedback, right? You're going to want to incorporate, and I'll show you how we're incorporating that into Meraki APIs. So, when we talk about scale considerations and we talk about what does it mean for it to be massively scalable, well, this is something that anyone could kind of define any way they want, but I want to explain how we're calling it. So first of all, first column, business outcomes. This is the most important one. Does it actually accelerate the business outcomes? Applications are a means to an end. They are not the end in and of themselves. So, is the operation that we're building, you might have heard an operation called an API endpoint, but we're calling them operations because that's just a better term for it in general. Is it relevant to your customer? Is it relevant to you? Is it relevant to your team? Is it relevant to an ecosystem partner? For us, is it relevant to the MSPs that are automating with our platform? Is it relevant to the ecosystem partners who are building paid solutions on our platform? That's number one. Number two, has to work in large environments. Now, large environment varies depending on the customer, but we're increasingly focused on large, extra large environments where you have thousands and thousands and thousands of devices as table stakes, not as a future scenario, as kind of where you are today. And you might be at any point in the process migrating from on-prem to hybrid cloud, or just doing a massive upgrade in the network. It kind of doesn't matter where you are. If you have a large environment, that's what we're talking about, right? So, does the API operation perform well if you have a large environment, right? If it works and you've got 5 devices, no one really cares. You don't even need an API, right? If you're only managing 5 devices, frankly, right? So that's number 2, right? And finally, will the customers who are using it, whether it's the partners or whoever, right, find it efficient to use? Not only does it have to be performant, but it also has to feel efficient, right? That might seem a little subjective, but I think you're going to see what I mean as we move on. And then as far as developer experience, when you're building it, is it intuitive to use? APIs and intuitive don't usually go hand in hand across the industry, don't usually go hand in hand across most industries, unfortunately, but this is something that's very important to us at Meraki. We want our APIs to be something that people who are not software developers can realize value out of and can do very quickly, right? So that's very important to us. And so if you do not have prior context on Meraki, maybe you're a network engineer, maybe you're not even a network engineer, can you get value out of the operation? That's super important to us, right? We don't want you to have to come in as even CCNA necessarily, right? We want you to be able to read the plain language in the API, even if you're manipulating it via Postman, Python script, or whatnot, and feel like you've got something you can action, right? So those are really the 3 pillar considerations for scale. Naming matters is the #1 consideration, and this applies whether you're writing a simple script that does a little thing, or something that's super complex, fully featured, built on Oracle. Naming really matters. So, what do we mean by that? Well, we'll talk about some of the problems, but naming is really the first form of documentation for anything that you're building, right? Something, whatever it is, that's named really well, becomes self-documenting. You know what it is because the name makes sense. You might be writing a little script in Python, thinking, okay, I'm gonna, for shorthand, put in some, num, num instead of number, and then I'm gonna do da-da-da, I'm gonna have a bunch of shorthand in all my variables, and then you find, okay, I don't actually remember what those things are, you try to share it with someone else, they don't know what your shorthand is, right? So that's an example of where the naming can be not so good, because you might be taking a shortcut. And so, complaints that come out of poor naming, right? I don't know what a thing does, because the name doesn't tell me what it is, right? If I tell you that there's a curtain network, right? What does that mean? That's kind of arcane. It doesn't really mean anything, right? So it's probably not a great name for a really important feature for whoever you're working with, right? And next, it's hard to adopt a thing. It might be the greatest feature in the world, right? Curtain networks is the next generation, right? But it's kind of impossible to do anything with it if you're trying to convince 3 other engineers that it's relevant, and then you have to explain what it is, right? So naming is a very important part of this. What we've learned is that developers don't like using things that are named confusingly. No one really does, right? Even if you're not automating, you're just working, navigating a GUI for whatever application, you see a term that doesn't make sense, it's not really fun to use, right? And so easy to use, readable APIs are really, really important, and it makes it easier to trust them, which is important to adopt them, right? If people don't trust what they're seeing, then they don't want to adopt. So the guidelines for naming anything, feature, anywhere, has to be explicit, unambiguous, meaning it doesn't overlap with 6 other terms that your organization uses, right? And self-documenting. Ideally, even the person who is not a network engineer, not a software developer, knows what you are looking at just from the name. When we get into JSON structures, they should be grouped so that the related attributes are actually put together visually, right? Hierarchically, in a way that makes sense. You wonder, does this attribute relate to that other attribute? Well, hopefully the grouping in the JSON structure, and we'll look at that in a moment, helps you understand that. And avoid abbreviations, acronyms, homegrown shorthand. These things might feel like they're saving you time. In the long run, they really don't, right? We're talking about application development, copy-paste is going to really save you time in the long run, because you'll have better terms for things, whether it's a variable in a script, all the way up to the name of the feature, or the name of a product, even. So, here's an example. This operation is a real operation in Meraki dashboard. Get organization devices, uplinks, addresses by device. I'm not going to call on you, but please raise your hand if you think you know what this does. Okay, a few hands, that's good. Now, for those who don't know, devices are what we call Meraki devices, switches, cameras, whatever, right? It could be an access point, could be whatnot. So when we say organization devices, we're talking about all the devices in the organization, right? Uplinks. We all know what network uplinks are, I think, right? Okay. So yeah, we're talking about the uplinks, and we're talking about the addresses assigned to those uplinks, right? You see that this is not like a super difficult thing to grok based on the name. So you can kind of have a good expectation of what you're actually going to get from it. Now, as an example, this is an actual output here, right? MAC, name, product type, serial, tags. These things are pretty straightforward, right? Like, you're not really wondering what is a tag. If you're not familiar with Meraki, you might, because that is domain specific, right? But if you're familiar with Gmail labels, it's a similar concept. And then we've got the uplinks object. It's an array. We start with interface WAN1. A lot of us have seen WAN1 before. And then we have the addresses, right? Protocol, IPv6. I think we all know what that is, right? Assignment mode is static in this case. We've got the address, the gateway, and then also the public IPv6 address. So it's a readable structure, right? You didn't have to be a Meraki expert to grok this. You didn't even really have to be a software developer. It's pretty straightforward. And we've grouped the related attributes, right? Now, you might have multiple interfaces in an MX device, like a router or whatnot, WAN 1, WAN 2, WAN 3, WAN 4, right? Well, this is actually grouped so that all the addresses for that interface are put together nicely. And if you had another interface, it'd be down here in a separate object, right? If you had other addresses, IPv4, right, or IPv6 link local, you would see those things listed out there as well. So it's easy to understand which addresses apply to interface WAN 1, vice WAN 2, et cetera, right? And we've avoided any unnecessary abbreviations, right? Sometimes IP address is shortened to just IP, right? And then you run into, okay, well, what do you call an IPv6 address if you call an IPv4 address an IP? Well, we're not doing that, right? We're just saying, we're using this word, which is really not that long, address, to tell you what the address is. So you know what you're looking at, right? Takeaways here. Great names. They enable you to adopt it quickly, right? If you're not an expert software developer, but you're dealing with the output of that operation because it's relevant to what you're trying to do, you're trying to get IPAM done for your whole organization and figure out what all your uplinks are, regardless of what the configs are, that's pretty actionable based on the structure and the output of this. And you could probably find it pretty easily by just putting in some search terms in Google, right? The names are explicit, they're unambiguous. We're not overlapping. We're not using IP for IP address. We're not to confuse you with IPv6. We're not saying it's a v6 address. We're saying it's an IPv6 address, that type of thing. And we're not using any homegrown shorthand, right? So this should be pretty straightforward. The next principle, signal is better than the volume of your data. This is something that I think we all know intuitively, but when you're dealing with massive deployments, is a big problem because there's a lot of noise in our data, all of our data, right? I would argue that the majority of data points that we deal with day to day are noise and are not really relevant or interesting to us. We, as problem solvers, have to weed through all of the noise to find the signal. And so signal is really important to focus on with whatever you're building. When you're improving the SNR, the signal to noise ratio of your products, you're going to get better results and your customers are going to appreciate that, right? If you have poor SNR, you're exposing a ton of data. You're giving a level 1 tech access to the full debug syslog. A lot of noise there. They're hourly. They're going to waste a ton of time and money. They're not really going to have a successful outcome there, right? It's going to feel like looking for a needle in a haystack, right? Even if you're an advanced network engineer, you're looking at a syslog. Wouldn't it be nice if you saw fewer events and really just the ones that seemed interesting, right? Or when you're dealing with an API, you need to make a lot of API calls. And so if you're fetching a lot of data, a lot of noise, in other words, because you're trying to get to a certain amount of signal, you end up making more API calls than you otherwise might want to do. And so you might get a complaint if you're providing an API, we need more budget, right? We need more API calls. But you're kind of just shoveling garbage faster, right? You're not necessarily making a better outcome. So what we've learned is that a sea of positive data points, right? Oh, you've got 100,000 devices, 99,999 of them are online. And guess what? You need to look at every single one to figure out which one is offline. That's no good, right? The positive data points are actually a little bit less interesting, right, when you have a huge amount of data. And so the signal there is actually the problem, right? Oh, there's one device that's offline, right? That one's the one you probably care about the most. And developers are generally accustomed to noisy data sets, right? They don't have an expectation that they're always going to be able to get great signal. They presume by default, I'm going to have to wade through the muck of tons of debug level garbage, right? They don't have an expectation that they're going to get great signal. So they're already in a habit of doing this, thinking they have to, right? You can actually improve their lives considerably by improving the SNR of the data sets that you offer. And it also reduces the number of API calls you have to make to get to an outcome. So, this is an existing API operation called Get Organization Devices Statuses. This is recently deprecated, does not mean we're killing it. We have guidance online that explains what deprecated means. I'm going to explain a little bit why in a moment. But this is a device that has, this is an object, an operation that has actually quite a bit of noise, right? I mentioned you might have 100,000 devices, and you're looking for the one that's offline. Well, checking every single device for what's on right now is not really the best way to do things, right? Like, you kind of want to get to, you know, what status changes have happened recently. You're a little bit more concerned about, did anything go down recently or at a certain window of time? So polling current status over and over again is a little exhausting and not really all that, it doesn't really give you that much value. In this example, we looked at this and we said, okay, how can we raise the bar, give you better SNR on something simple like, are your devices up or down, right? We know that the signal is going to drive the efficient outcomes. And we know that less data, as long as it's concentrated signal, is better than more data. So, if you've ever used Meraki dashboard, this is a screen you might have seen before. I'm going to explain what device availability means. We're just using that as a term to be a little bit more explicit about status. A device may be online without WAN connectivity. It might not be able to reach Meraki dashboard. In that case, it's not available. It's not necessarily manageable from Meraki. Might still be online, might still be running. We're using that instead of status just to be a little more explicit, right? But as we look at this status, this column is telling you a little bit of the history of what these devices have done over time. But if you have an environment where it's almost all green like this, it's pretty difficult to see what went wrong and when, right? Can anyone just shout it out if you can see it, where there was one connectivity blip, one availability blip? Can anyone see it? Okay, a couple people, right? But it's pretty difficult. Right there? Not good UX, right? And this is what I'm talking about when I say reflection, right? This is currently available in dashboard. It's the type of thing we want to improve and the type of thing we are actioning, starting with the API. So, we've reimagined the statuses operation for gathering status. And instead of looking at the current status and polling that every 5 minutes, is it up, is it up, is it up, we're giving you the change history in a single operation. So you can just ask us what devices changed status during a time span and what was the change. And then we'll just give you that data directly, right? And we won't give you information about non-changes, right? If it's been up the whole time, it's not super relevant to your troubleshooting, right? Or at least the fact that it's up the whole time means that you don't really have to worry about did it go down, right? So in this case, we've got a single event. It's got a timestamp. The device, it tells you what it was. It was an access point. Tells you that the old status was online, but it went offline at that time. And it tells you what network it was in, right? Now, if you have 100,000 devices, you call this API operation, maybe you give us a time span of a week or 2 weeks or a month, and you get one event back. Maybe it's this one. It means that the only device that changed status during that entire month was this one device, and that's what it did. It went offline. So that's all that happened. Now, that's kind of unrealistic in a real-world scenario, right? But theoretically, right, you see how you're immediately forgetting almost 100,000 devices and focusing on just the one that had a blip. Was that the one that the CEO was connected to? Maybe, right? Oh, that's pretty good. I didn't have to worry about any of the other ones because they were all green. So instead of showing you that sea of green, right, we're showing you, again, granted, it's a JSON structure, but we're showing you really just the red blip. So this is why we're deprecating the statuses and encouraging people to use this instead. But another example of this is get organization configuration changes. You might be doing configuration auditing, and you're running into, did someone change the config? Well, you could poll the config constantly, or you could just ask us, did anyone change the config during this time span? And then we'll tell you. So these operations are available today, and you can get something out of them. So what am I saying here? Signal drives efficient outcomes, right? In order to do the signal, you really need to understand the business use case, right? Status is not a thing that matters in and of itself, right? It's because you need to know, for troubleshooting purposes, for quality of experience purposes, that it wasn't related to the incident that you had, and that it was working, right? And the signal is going to drive more efficient outcomes. More data is not better than less data. If it's concentrated signal, you've got a much better, efficient solution. The final principle that we're going to talk about, and we're going to move into some examples after this, is that when you're building something that gives you a ton of telemetry, we've learned that we should aggregate by default and let people filter when necessary. So what do I mean by that? Well, clients will aggregate data inefficiently if that's the only way that they have to actually achieve an outcome. So maybe they're wondering about packet loss. And so you have an API call that says, for this access point, for this time span, tell me what the packet loss was. You're going to iterate through 100,000 devices to figure out what it was for all of them now, right? It's pretty inefficient. And so that's what we mean by aggregation. So if someone's having an issue with this, they're going to say, it's taking way too much time to do this, right? I have to do 100,000 devices to get to that set of data, right? I don't want to iterate over all of that. I don't want to iterate over the networks. I don't want to have to do that. And we know that the data aggregation is inevitable. People will do it because they have use cases that depend on it. So make their lives easier, right? Do the work for them. Also, offer the filters when necessary. Instead of saying, okay, you have to iterate over every device, give them a call that gives the information for all the devices, but add some filters. So if they maybe don't care about all the devices, maybe they only care about one network, one site, they care about devices with just a single tag, let them filter on that so they can get just that data. Now what they'll do, if you don't give them that, is they'll grab everything. They'll pull everything down, and then in their client, they're going to filter the data. But that's inefficient. That wastes your server resources. It wastes their time. It increases the complexity of their applications, right? And no one likes doing extra work. So back to the availabilities change history. This is a filterable operation. Maybe you are a wireless admin. You don't care about cameras. You don't care even about switches. You probably should care about switches if you're a wireless admin, but maybe you don't care about MXs, right? Maybe you don't care about some of these other things, right? You can filter based on time span. You can say, just show me what happened between Thursday and Friday, or you can say, just show me what happened last week, right? You can also say, just show me switch, or just show me switch and appliance, or just show me cameras if that's all you care about. You can also filter based on network IDs. So you have a site. I only want to see what happened at that site, right? Because you're responsible only for 1 or 2 or 3 sites. The filters are there. And you can even filter based on what the status changes were. Maybe you don't care about any changes between alerting and online. You only care about offline, right? So you can filter on that as well. Reducing the noise, signal, concentrated. Enabled by aggregation by default, because you get everything, every event across that org by default. And then filtering to those specific areas that you care about. Another example, get organization, appliance, uplinks, usage by network. Well, we've talked about uplinks. If you're not familiar with appliance, that's just a Meraki term for an SD-WAN device, right? So its uplinks usage by network tells you that WAN 1 sent 200, and I think this is in kilobits, and then received 400 kilobits in that time span. And you can filter this as well. You can, do it by network. You can do it by whatnot. Another one, this is a new one, also GA. Get organization assurance alerts. If you're looking at Meraki dashboard and you're wondering, what kinds of alerts have I come into my dashboard? Well, the assurance team has released get organization assurance alerts so you don't have to iterate over your networks. Any alerts that came in across your organization, you get them by default in a single response. But if you want to filter, you can do that. You can look at just a single network, right? Another example, get organization wireless SSIDs statuses by device. Another new operation. You might have a use case where you need to ensure to your customer that their SSIDs, which they are paying you to provide, have actually been broadcasting. And you might also need to tell them it's broadcasting on 5 gigahertz, it's broadcasting on 6 or 2.4 or whatnot, right? Well, previously you had to iterate over every single device to get this information, which, as you know, if you have so many thousands of devices, is pretty inefficient. Well, with this call, you get all of them, and there's a couple cool things about this. First of all, if you're familiar with Meraki dashboard, we give you 16 SSID slots. Now, realistically, you should never have 16 SSIDs broadcasting anywhere, right? That's an RF thing. We're not going to get into that. But by default, we filter it to just the stuff that's enabled, right? So if your SSID is turned off, we're not going to include it here. Most networks have like 13 empty slots, which are never enabled because they don't have any active config there. We're not going to shove that noise into this response by default. You can grab it if you want. There's a query param to unfilter that. But by default, we're going to show you just the stuff that's actually enabled, so you can see which radios are broadcasting the SSIDs that you care about. But it doesn't just apply to telemetry. It also applies to resource configurations. And what do we mean by resource? This is an abstract term for virtually anything that you manage, right? It could be a feature, a setting, it could be a single QoS rule, or it could be an entire site, right? It could be a single device, or it could be an IP config, right? Resource is just an abstract term for those things. And so what we're doing, and I'll show you some examples, is instead of having to look at it on a per device or per network basis, we're aggregating those so you can get them across your whole organization really quickly. So we give you the index, that's a get that shows you multiple resources, to retrieve all the resources, and then, again, aggregating by default, but giving you the filters so you can narrow it down if you need to. And if you want to update, that hasn't changed. You just do the one to update the one resource because those configs can vary based on device or network or whatnot. It's a bit of a mouthful, but with this operation, get organization appliance, traffic shaping VPN exclusions by network, hopefully, you kind of have some idea of what that is just from the name, right? VPN exclusions. Well, if you're running an MX site and you don't want Salesforce to tunnel back to your data center over VPN and waste that bandwidth, you want to break it out. That's what we're talking about by VPN exclusions. And it's configured by network. Each network has its own configs. So you're able to get everything for the whole organization in a single call, right? And this is the structure. This is just one, but after this, you would have the next network. So you have 1,000 networks, you want to check the config on all of them, you want to audit them, a single API call. You don't have to iterate over the networks. I'll give you another example. Get organization switch ports by switch. In this, you're looking at the configs for each of the switch ports, VLANs, PoE settings, et cetera. If you want to gather that information, you don't have to make a single API call to every single switch anymore. You can make it to the organization level, and then we'll tell you, this is the config for this switch, and these are all the ports for that switch, right? Massively saving you time. And the filters, like I mentioned before, they still apply. So you want to look at just a single network, or maybe you just want to look at a single device, you can do that. You don't have to iterate over everything, but it's saving you a ton of time. Another example, get organization wireless RF profiles, assignments by device. Hopefully also the name helps you understand what it is. RF profiles, that's how you're telling us how you want the RF to behave for some number of access points. The assignments is which profiles are assigned to which device, right? Now you could previously go and iterate over every single device and say, what profile is it using? But what we're telling you here is that this device in this network is using this RF profile. And maybe it's not using the indoor default, but it is using the outdoor default. And so this is massively increasing the efficiency of auditing this config. Another example, get organization wireless air marshal settings by network. If you're using air marshal to mitigate SSID spoofing or whatnot, right, then you can get all of this network settings, the default policy, in a single call. You don't have to iterate over every single network, right? It's a new operation. It's been asked for a while. Really happy that we have this out. Air marshal rules tell you specifically if you see a pattern like this, if you see someone spoofing my specific SSID, this is what I would let you to, this is what I'd like you to do. Those are applied on a per network basis, but again, we're giving you it at the organization level, so you can be much more efficient in gathering that information. So you can see here, it's the rule ID, says type allow, when it was updated, when it was created, and also which network it applies to, right? So if you have, across your entire deployment, maybe 5 rules, you don't have to figure out which networks they're in. One call is going to give you all of them. So again, aggregating and filtering, do the work for the customer if you can, right? Put the information together. It doesn't mean that you're losing the level of detail. That's important, right? You want to keep that level of detail. If you're the data provider, you are best positioned to do that, right? Because otherwise they're going to use your API to pull all the data, and that's going to be less efficient. The filters really help multiply the utility of your operations, both by making them more helpful and more outcome-oriented, right? If you don't care about the whole set of data, then you can just ask us for the part that matters to you. And this ultimately reduces OpEx, right? It reduces OpEx for you and your teams because you have fewer API operations to do, simpler applications to build. And if you're the one providing the API, it means that your server resources are actually conserved as well, right? It's just more efficient overall. It's a win-win. So, to summarize, it says 4 principles, but that's because I consolidated them. It's really 3. Naming matters, right? Going back to naming. First form of documentation that anyone has with your product. When you're building anything, internally, product, offering, whatever, name it well. It's not easy to do, right? I admit that. It's not easy to name well, right? But it really, really helps in the long run. A great name makes a big difference. When you're building a data provider or when you're actually working with surfacing something to your customers, prioritize the signal and not the volume of the data, right? I know a lot of us have customers asking, I want to see all these graphs, right? And maybe that's the way that we deliver value to them because they just want to see the graphs and they're not really doing anything interesting with the data. But if you can highlight in those graphs where the interesting stuff is, right? Distill that signal, you're going to be offering a better service than your competitors. And aggregate by default. This is something we've learned internally. Aggregate by default so people have access to the data in the way that makes sense to them without having to iterate through tons of devices, hundreds of thousands of devices, or thousands of networks, or even multiple dashboard organizations. And so we're incorporating these principles into our feature releases. I just showed you a bunch of pretty recent feature releases that are incorporating these principles. And as we move forward, you'll see more feature releases that actually take those into account. That's my presentation. Thank you so much for coming. Please do fill out the session evaluations. It's very helpful to me personally, but it also helps the organizers make sure that we're delivering content that's helpful to you. Should only take a couple minutes. There's only a couple questions. Really appreciate it. Consider me your cab driver. Give me 5 stars. Thanks. I appreciate it. We do have some continuing education available to you. And again, the WebEx room. If you have any questions after the fact, you're like, oh, I wanted to look at that operation, I want the docs link, feel free to ask. Happy to share, right? Thank you so much. I'll be up here for a bit. If you have any questions, feel free to stop by.
Our audio's not on. Our audio's not on. Hey. Hello. Thanks for coming to Cisco Youth Theater. Thanks for joining us on this last day of Cisco Live. We're excited to talk about a really important topic. Y'all may be AI'd out, though. Is everybody kind of like a little AI'd out? There's a lot of AI here. So we're going to talk less about artificial intelligence and more about reskilling. Because AI is just part of what we as leaders need to do within our companies to evolve them, to mature them, to move them forward, and to, honestly, make more money. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we drive productivity and efficiency to be more profitable so that we grow and we don't lay people off, but instead we're growing and investing in our workforce. And that's what we're going to talk about today. My name is Annie Hardy. I'm a futurist at Cisco studying the future of the internet. I've made a move recently to the partner org, so if you're a partner, you might be seeing more of me.
My name is Susan Mintz. I'm the leader in people growth with technical skills. I'm also a disruptor, a creator, an innovator, and an educator. Welcome.
So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about how Susan, me, and a whole bunch of other people have partnered together in Cisco to reskill our Cisco workforce. We're going to give you an idea of where we started. We're going to give you an idea of some of the key components that we actually employed to drive success inside 85,000 employees. And then we're going to talk to you about the way that you could get started to build programs internally, bit by bit, piece by piece, to reskill your workforce for the AI era as well. So where do we start? It's 2022. November of 2022, actually, past that, ChatGPT launched in November 2022, and what happened? Everybody flipped out. All of your employees started getting stoked about it. You probably started using it. We started using it to write prose and poetry. We started using it to understand things that were happening in the world. People were ignorant because they didn't realize the information in ChatGPT was pulled in 2021, so they started misusing it and quoting it incorrectly. Samsung actually ended up putting information that 4 of their employees lost trade secrets because they didn't realize that anything you put into ChatGPT gets woven back into the code of the machine. And so Samsung lost trade secrets. It's a big, huge deal. So all of this is happening in the winter of 2022. And in January of 2023, as a futurist, I've been studying AI and involved in AI projects. I said, people inside Cisco need to really understand what generative AI is, AI transformers, AI generators. So I created a presentation in February of 2023 and presented it to a couple of teams of people. And immediately, I got pulled into the Cisco engine of people inside Cisco that were saying, what's the risk? What's the opportunity? What's happening here? We need to be cautious. What do we do? So in March of 2023, I said, there's so much activity. What we need to do is we need to build a community, and I'll talk more about the community. Then we move on. I met Susan because she heard about the talk I did. She pulled me in to what she did in April of 2023. And then consistently, we started to build a more structured, more formalized program, and we'll talk to you about what that looked like as it evolved. The community I built that I started just reached 4,500 people this week. It's been immensely successful, and it's a big part of how I've been able to take this and what I want to share with you about community building and the importance of it in reskilling. So that's where we're going to start, honestly. We're going to talk about what we did that was community-driven. We're going to talk about how we have an internal expertise-rich culture when it comes to Gen AI. And then we're going to talk about the novelty that Susan has applied to these models. So to begin, and I'm walking all over the place because I'm looking at my slides. Okay, so from a community-driven perspective, it's driven by, for, and within the community of employees. So one of the things we noticed, Cisco's been doing predictive analytics, predictive modeling, predictive machine learning for over a decade. Your company has probably been using AI, not even realizing it. We've been using machine learning. What happened with generative AI is the really exciting stuff was getting in the way of real business happening. I don't know if you're seeing this happening, but I know for a fact, like we work with an insurance company and they told me we have 30 machine vision models that we want to launch, but everybody's using the infrastructure to support this novel generative AI. It's getting in the way of real business happening. That's where there's a lot of buzz about generative AI, but it's getting in the way of business. And so I said, what we need to do is, it was happening in our machine learning and artificial intelligence group, it was happening in our data science group, and it's happening in these groups that were dedicated to practitioners of data science and practitioners of machine learning. You had fans who were like, yeah, let's go ChatGPT. So I think the first thing I wanted to recognize and I realized was we need productive innovation spaces and creative innovation spaces. Productive is like our AI and machine learning group, our data science community. They're doing real work. They're using Python, they're using R or SPSS, they're doing the stuff. They're building the things, the predictive models, probabilistic modeling. Then we have developers, marketers, project managers, culture drivers, people who are like, yes, we want to use generative AI, we're really excited about it, let's talk about it. Let's talk about ChatGPT. It's not machine learning. It's the democratization of AI, but it's a different animal altogether. So the first thing I did was say, let's create a space that is dedicated to creative ideation so that we can still do predictive AI work. So we spun up this group, Generative AI Explorers. What we wanted to do is make sure that people were inspired and that we gave them the ability to really invest, and we wanted them to have energy around this, but we also needed visibility into the risk. So what came out of that was actually the first audit that Cisco ever did about internal what I call shadow AI. It's happening in your company. What's the shadow AI that's happening? How are people using large language models on your infrastructure, on your hardware, on your computers and equipment? When you create a community, there's an open forum. People share things. You can pull it in and you can de-risk. Right? So the first inventory of products, the first inventory of models of all of these, 85,000 employees is a lot of people. Looking at that came out of this community. Also what happened was people started sharing about projects that they were working on, and other people were doing similar things, so we pulled them together. I would spin up subgroups. I spin up a group dedicated to people who are using GPT-4 for content. Spun up a group that was dedicated to people who were, engineers. Now we have one for project and change managers. Now we have one for people who are putting together sales in generative AI with an RFI and RFP bot. So you had these sub-communities that were productive, that were moving projects through the funnel to have real business value. But it was separate from the fan space. You can't just have one fan space. You have to pull off and siphon off that productive stuff to actually drive business value. Those are separate communities that are within the culture and within the umbrella of Generative AI Explorers, but they're separate. And then what we also did was we saw who was really good at this. We had this internal culture of expertise. And so Susan was able to learn about the people that were doing it and start building relationships, and she'll talk about those in a minute. On that note, is it not?
Here we go.
And here we go.
Thank you. You hang on to that.
Okay.
I don't know. So I have a great story. I hope you enjoy a story, and I hope you love it. Before we get started, I know we're a little bit fatigued, a little bit AI'd out this week. I hope you're having a good time here. Raise your hand. Excited about AI, passionate about AI, curious about AI. Come on, guys. A little apprehensive about AI? Okay, so that's where we started, maybe about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, as Annie mentioned, when OpenAI came out with ChatGPT 4. Those spaces that Annie was mentioning where everybody was being pulled in, everybody was talking. I mean, let's face it, we had AI around Cisco for at least a good 10 years. We have a solid curriculum there. No worries. We're hearing a little bit of a thrum around ChatGPT, but it hadn't gotten really crazy yet, just kind of hearing some chatter in the background. When version 4 came out, it literally exploded. There was a surge of energy that was palpable. You could almost feel it. And everybody was talking about everything, loading up everything, every article that was out there, everybody's responding, everybody's giving little emojis. We're really big on emoji and recognition and appreciation, but nobody's talking about And it's really weird. And I'm hearing all these rumors and nobody's talking about, and I'm thinking, that's really strange. Why hasn't this come up yet? And then all of a sudden, in the middle of this very, very, very busy going back and forth chat, I hear this meek little voice. I think people are afraid they're going to lose their jobs. And it was a hush. It was just uncharacteristically quiet. I thought, brave soul. Thank you for putting it out there, because we're all talking about it. We're all thinking about it. And finally, one person responded and said, well, here's an article about corporations that are going to be reducing their workforce. And again, complete silence. And then all of a sudden, we went back to just loading up articles again. Myth, legend, whatever. As an educator, this is what I'm thinking. PhD in educational psychology. I care about what people are thinking. I care about what people are learning. I care about how people are feeling. And I care about what we're going to do about AI. I'm one of those people that was passionate, excited, curious, and a little bit apprehensive. So I decided as an educator, what's my greatest tool? What's the greatest tool that I have in my toolbox? And that's education. So this is where we began. I saw Annie's text. I'm going to do this talk. I'm going to talk about an introduction to Gen AI. And I said, Annie, I have a big microphone. I'm a leader in technical skills for people growth. Work with me. I can introduce you. I can have you out there. I can have a lot of people hearing what you have to say at Cisco. I think it's really, really important. And I need to look at this. Okay. So when I'm seeing Annie, I'm also hearing all these other voices. So Annie introduces me to Daryl, who's forming a COE, Center of Excellence. He welcomes me into the team. Daryl introduces me to Gaurav, who's also an expert and an instructor. Gaurav introduces me to Victor, and so on, and it goes. And we form a core team. With that core team, we get together, we decide we can execute on this. Let's put together something that is a little bit different than what we've done in the past.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. So what I wanted to do was meet the moment in time. This was different. I wanted to meet learners where they were. Let me talk a little bit about why I think this is different. This isn't Python. No one's at risk. There aren't any ethics involved when we're teaching Python. There's nothing to worry about when we're doing agile methodologies. I have a huge portfolio. I have all the curricula in there, but AI is different. Nobody's worrying about sustainability with Kubernetes or Docker. Nobody's worried about, is there unconscious bias? Or is there lack of fairness? Or what's going to happen to people if I keep learning how to use Docker? Is somebody going to lose their job? The answer is no. So one of the premises that we had that we could rely on and build off of and recommend that everybody do, have an AI strategy, have AI principles, have an AI policy, which are all the things that we started with over a year ago that Chuck and team have announced over and over again. Have an AI governance team, make sure you're connected with legal. And I do touch base with legal every other week. We have a standing call. They tell me what they're doing. I tell them what I'm doing, and we make sure everything is kosher. Have an RAI committee. I'm on that committee. Responsible AI, so that people are monitoring as well. And again, this is one of the driving forces for why this is a little bit more non-traditional. Python, Agile, Kubernetes, I can go anywhere and get that content, and I don't have to worry about it as long as it's high quality. And it's good content, and it's reputable, and I know them. I can bring that into Cisco, and I'm not concerned about it. But with AI, they don't know our policy. They don't know our context. They don't know the buzz. They don't know our people. They don't know what's happening in the background. So that's why it was so critical at that time to work with internal SMEs. And we started building this with 3 prongs. We have a quarterly Cisco event called Cisco Illuminate. We believe and we promote 365-day learning. I started out with this a couple of years ago in the very first Illuminate, where I had 18 technical webinars. It was kind of a side note. You know, leadership, DEI, all of those things, sustainability, they were out there being broadcasted, and it was fantastic. It was really good. But I had my 18 live webinars for tech. I had them in each region, and after that, they were dropped. Go forward a couple of Illuminate sessions, a couple of quarters later, and you're hearing the tech voice. We're a high-tech company, where's the technical content? So I thought, okay, perfect opportunity. September 2023, G2 Patel is talking with Andrew Ng about AI. Andrew Ng is a global, has a global presence around AI. He's the co-founder at Coursera, and he's the founder for deeplearning.ai. By the way, deeplearning.ai has great generative AI content. We've curated it, we've vetted it, we use it as optional content in some of the pathways that I'm going to tell you about. I highly recommend it if you're looking for some place to go. And by the way, we've also vetted some external content from Google and from Microsoft that also have introductory pathways. So good stuff, again, optional in our pathways right now. So we continued from there, and each subsequent Illuminate, I've added more AI content and more Gen AI content, whether it's product-based, innovation-based, we're talking to experts, we have something every time. The Illuminate Tech Talk series was born out of that very first one I had. I was taken by the talent at Cisco and didn't know why we didn't have a forum that consistently, I mean, we have a lot of forums, but I wanted a consistent educational forum, 60 to 90 minutes. You've got expertise in something, bring it forward. Share it. Again, I've got a big microphone, I can share it with everybody. Annie's talk alone got close to 1,000 people, and as she said, had over 4,000 since. We have another one that we have, I Am Responsible for AI, that's in our pathways, which I'll talk about in a second, every single one of our pathways because it's so important. It's 13 minutes, over 10,000 views. So we can get the word out there, and we did with the Tech Talk series, which is now loaded down with content on AI and Gen AI. We have a recording of it, we have a recording library, we market it, we get it out to people all the time. Our learning pathways, green, blue, black. We have a couple of others, but green is fundamental knowledge for technical and non-technical people. Blue is fundamental for practitioners, technical roles. Black, we're in the process of building right now. It's going to culminate in a practical project, and we're expecting that those people that come out of that program are going to be our leaders and our mentors and part of our champions program, and people that we can use throughout Cisco to continue to lead this journey as we go through AI and Gen AI. What I also like about using the SMEs is because we knew when we started this that Gen AI, and you heard Chuck talk about this in the keynote on Tuesday, Gen AI is moving so rapidly, so fast. We knew this wasn't going to be one of those things where you could put training in place, walk away from it, come back in a few years and look at it again. We look at this constantly, and because it's internal SMEs who care and are as passionate as I am, they come to me and say, we need to re-record that. We need to do something different. We're missing this. We need to add this. As information comes through, we're able to nimbly and with high quality and credible content continue to evolve and notify our learners, hey, there's more content out there. You have your badge, you can keep your badge. We want you to be recognized, we want you to feel good about what you're doing, and we do recognize, by the way. Every time they get a badge, they get an email congratulating them, it goes to their manager gets an email telling them about the new skills that their employee just took on and asking them to recognize them in ways that they can do that. So in any case, these fresh voices, these internal SMEs allow us to keep the content fresh and moving, and that's critical on this Gen AI journey. This is just the tip of the iceberg in regard to the scope that we have in terms of content. We've highlighted a few of these. I Am Responsible for AI, that's the one that's hit over 10,000. Intro to Large Language Models, this is one of our optional content. It's excellent, it's out on YouTube, by the way, really good. Ethics in the Age of Generative AI, Artificial Neural Networks, Prompt Engineering, of course, we have a basic course, we also have co-pilots. You name it, we've got it, we're addressing it. If it's out there, we're dealing with it, and we continue to deal with it as it comes forward. Hugging Face, we have a lot of content around Hugging Face. As we move forward, you'll see that it gets more and more technical. And here is Annie's Generative AI Introduction, which hit over 4,000 views, and we're going to re-record that in August to keep that fresh as well. Annie.
Okay. So what's really cool now is when we have the question of somebody who says, I'm worried about my job, the next phase for us isn't just the black belt. It's a collaboration of content, finding internal experts and internal advocates that represent their roles. So again, in the project and change management group, we have given people who are concerned that their jobs are going to be outsourced by AI, that they're going to lose their jobs, we've given them a forum to share with each other to evolve their skills. We've given marketers the opportunity to do it, designers the opportunity to do it. So what we're doing is we're giving the power back to people to a degree to drive their own success collaboratively. This open forum, this community that we've built is a really critical focus of our organizations. And the pathways are actually mandatory for a lot of the leaders in our company. We just got an email last week that one of the SVPs is mandating that everybody under thousands of people take these pathways. Yeah, there's several of them. So this started as a grassroots effort that said we see a problem and we're going to work to solve it. We have very little budget, if any. I've had no budget for this. We look for our internal SMEs, which again, that's free. We're trying to figure out how to do this on a shoestring to spin up something fast, where we don't have to get a bureaucratic approval. We're good to go. And that's what we've done, effectively. And that's where you can start as well, right? So where do you begin? The first thing is that open culture. Shadow AI is all over your company. If you don't know who's using generative AI, then they're doing it, they're just not telling you about it. So how can you create an open forum so people can discuss these risky behaviors, risky activities, give you visibility and insight so you can foster creativity and innovation while still recognizing the fact that you need to put some rails around it. You need to help them understand how to be responsible for AI. An open culture is where we began, and I highly recommend building a community that gives you visibility. Second, involve learning professionals. Not just a project manager, but somebody who understands learning, how to build scaffolding that gives people the skills for the future. This isn't just a pet project. It isn't just something that's nice to do or fun to do. We are evolving your workforce so that in 10 years, that 80% of jobs that they say are going to be outsourced by Gen AI, your workforce has other skills. They're upskilling, they're doing new things, and they're using tools to accelerate their success and your success. And then opening a forum. So having not just a community where you're talking, but giving them the opportunity to respond and looking to say, if you're an expert, come on and share your expertise. It's amazing how often I've told somebody, they've had an idea and I said, would you speak about that? Let me introduce you to Susan.
Let me just say one thing here, though. I do think it's really important. We've been hearing a lot about this as we've been here throughout the week, and obviously we're all talking to each other about how we're doing and what we're hearing. Do make sure you have an AI strategy. Do make sure you have an AI policy. Do make sure you have principles that are documented that everybody can access. Do make sure you have legal engaged with you, and do make sure that you have a responsible AI, call it what you will, a responsible AI workforce that's out there monitoring to make sure, because there's wonderful things that can happen from AI, as we all know, but the risks are real. And we want to be responsible, and we want to have a positive impact on the world.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. You can look at the Cisco Trust Center and you can see our responsible AI framework and our policy if you would like to check it out. Also talk to whoever represents you at Cisco to get more information about that if you'd like. But I think the last thing I'll say is that the fact that you're sitting here curious about reskilling the workforce, you are advocating for your people. Thank you. Thank you. What we also have, the last thing, is that under one of these seats, there's a ticket. The person who has a seat with the ticket, we will bring it up to me and I'll give you a gift. We thank you today for your time, and I want to now open it for any questions. So check your stools and let us know if you have questions or thoughts.
Check the empty stools.
Yeah, I know. First come, first serve.
Hey, can you put it on our slide with our contact information?
This.
Guys, if you're interested and want to hear more, okay, here we have a winner.
Woo! Two winners. Come on up. So if you're interested and want to learn more,
please do reach out to us. Take a photo. Sorry, Annie.
And then if this session, so they ask you what you liked at Cisco Live. If this is a session you want to hear more about not only the cool innovations that are happening, but how you actually implement those in your organization in a safe way, tell them. Show them, give us a rating, tell them that right? Those look nice.
Look at the prize.
Right? Tell them that you like this presentation so that we drive more of this inside our theater. So, all right, we're happy to take any questions. Thank you all very much, and I hope you travel well and travel safely.
We're happy to hear from you later.
Yep.
Take care, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I know this is day number 4, Thursday. Everybody's tired. Everybody wants to go catch their flights. But you're here, which means you're the true nerds, right? You're like me. Perfect. OK. We are going to talk about migrating to CDO and MCD, Multicloud Defense Orchestrator, right? And then towards the end, I have a few specific traffic use cases, and then the things you need to watch out for when you do that actual migration. All right. So my name is Jagpreet Singh. I work for NterOne. NterOne is a learning and services partner with Cisco. And my day in and day out job is to do design, implementation, networking for everything, anything underneath the Cisco sun, pretty much. Right? Perfect. Now, before we begin, you can join the WebEx app. I see some of you have already in there. Somebody already asked for the slides. We'll get those in there. But you can join the WebEx app, ask questions, connect with me afterwards as well. We'll be monitoring that till June 7. Right? So find the session in the WebEx app and join in. Perfect. Here's a quick setup of the agenda. Like I said, we will talk about quick overview of the CDO, Cisco Defense Orchestrator, Multicloud Defense, which is part of CDO now. If you've already used it, great. If you've not, this will be the first time you'll see it. And then we'll talk about the multi-cloud defense architectures. Why is that important? How is that changing what I think its applications could be moving forward? And then we'll go into how do you actually do the migrations. How do you actually do the migrations is actually pretty easy, pretty simple. We'll touch base on that even at the start. But we'll talk about things that you need to watch out for when you do those. All right. Completely forgot I had the clicker. OK. So CDO, SaaS-based platform, cloud delivered. You can onboard on-premises FMCs directly to it. You can onboard on-premises FTDs if you're using the threat defense directly. If you have old ASAs, those can be onboarded. So essentially, move your management plane to the cloud, manage, upgrade, deploy everything from the cloud. A little bit easier said than done. And so that you don't fall for the gotchas, for the pitfalls, that's what we'll try and cover today, right? OK. And multi-cloud defense is part of CDO now. It's a cross-launch from the CDO GUI. So when you go into the GUI, you cross-launch the multi-cloud defense GUI. And that's where you configure your multi-class defense gateways. I'm pretty sure you've already been in a session and you've heard about it. If you've not, then don't worry, we'll go over it fairly quickly. All right. So what can CDO deliver? First things first, the cloud-delivered FMC is an application running within CDO. So it's a cloud-delivered, same look and feel as your on-premises FMCs that you've been using for all your different firewalls and ASAs, FTDs, right? However, you move it to the cloud. But because it's the same, it can detect the same objects. You can reuse them for new configuration. The brownfield migration is much easier. Right? And you can support up to 1,000 devices with it. The big part is fully SaaS. If you completely adopt it, all your logging, which is a question that I always get from, especially from service providers or partners managing this for multiple customers, is what about the logging, right? Does that stay on premises, or does that also move to the cloud? And how effectively can we use the logging for future action when required, for analytics when required? So we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Cloud-delivered FMC, cloud-delivered firewall management. Like I said, if you have on-premises firewalls deployed, or if you have on-premises FMCs deployed, you don't have to do anything. Just open port 443, that's it. It's all API integration, right? However, if you do have ASAs, if you do have others, then there are a few other things to do, and we'll cover that towards the end, right? OK. So cloud logging delivered, CLI API access, one centralized dashboard, which means if I need to orchestrate stuff across multiple branch sites, change rules, change policies, figure out duplicate rules, now I don't have to go to 10 different FMCs, or worst, to the individual FTD logins and figure that out, I could just go to the CDO, do an API call, and change everything from there, right? Okay. 3 ways, easy ways to onboard devices to CDO. First one is use the CLI registration key. So you log in, create a registration token on CDO, apply it to your firewall, gets connected, right? Watch out for the versions, and I'll call that out later too. You can use the serial numbers if you're using an on-premises FMC already. Again, watch out for the versions. Not everybody's running the latest ones, right? Or you could just deploy the FTD in cloud through CDO directly, right? Let's say you're starting your journey now, or maybe you're moving from a third-party solution over to Cisco. You could just transport the config and deploy everything directly to the cloud-based solution, right? Directly from CDO to on-premises or to AWS, Azure, wherever you're deploying those FMC. Okay. 3 different models. As you transition, 3 different paths. First one is get the CDO tenant up and activated. Everything's running on-premises, so your config, your analytics, your events are all on-prem. Then you move your config in the hybrid step number 2 to CDO, and then slowly, as you get more comfortable and you're willing to share data across and your customer's okay, then you start going to the complete SaaS delivered model, right? Sometimes the concern is, hey, configs and everything's fine. We don't want to send events and logs and everything else to the cloud, right? Okay. So the key-based authentication is fairly simple. On the CDO dashboard, all you have to do is create your registration token, go to the FTD CLI command, provide the registration token, and it'll try and register to CDO. The only limitation is you make sure that port 443 and a couple of other TLS ports are open to the cloud access. Okay. Now, if you're doing cloud-assisted provisioning, that was the serial number option that we saw in our slide earlier, right? You've got firepowers, and you want to be able to onboard them across all your branches. You could just add the serial number so the devices show up on CDO, and once they make that connection, it whitelists them. It says, yeah, you're good to connect, and you get onboarded, right? Okay. Or number 3 that we saw in that list, just go to CDO, start deploying your FTDVs in AWS, Azure, or GCP. Oh, go ahead. No. Yeah, you can get your devices directly connected as well. We'll talk about that more. Yeah, if you have on-premises ASAs and you're not using FTDs or FMCs, or you have, FTDs and you're not using an on-prem FMC, even they can directly go to cloud-delivered FMC. Yeah. But that's actually a good question. We get that quite a bit. Okay. All right. So if you're onboarding ASAs, to your question, I don't have cloud-delivered FMC, I just have ASAs spread all across. I use them for RAVPN still, right? No harm in that. You could onboard the ASA management directly to that cloud-delivered solution, right? So it forms that S2S peer. All you have to do again is, so with the ASAs, there are a couple of things. I don't want to spoil my last slide, but we'll get to that. But it's a direct IPsec tunnel. So everything is TLS, and it's connecting to the management interface for that ASA device, right? Hey, but what if we have different contexts running? What if I have multiple security contexts? What if I have multiple management contexts running on my different ASAs? Then how does it work? We'll wait till the end to answer that. Okay. Centralized RAVPN dashboard. So you don't have to jump from one FMC, one ASA, ASTM to figure out where are my users connecting, right? Are they doing RAVPN from which region? Are they facing issues? I have a centralized dashboard, which is a big plus, especially if you're doing multiple RAVPNs globally, which a lot of people jumped to after 2020 and are still doing, waiting for the next refresh cycle. Right? Okay. Sorry, I got a bunch of slides, so I'm going through them a little bit fast, but please feel free to stop me if you have any questions. All right. Okay. So the centralized dashboard, and I'll go straight into the event viewer. If you're doing logging on the cloud, which means no logging on-premise, you've moved everything to CDO, all logging, everything done, you get an amazing event viewer shows you the complete events, and you can do filters and checks globally across all deployed devices, right? Great. A lot of people can do that. A lot of devices can do that. What's the add-on advantage? Let's see. The add-on advantage is analytics on those logs which you're storing on the SaaS cloud. What do I gain from that analytics? You gain if you add the XDR integration into your licensing purchase. What can XDR do? Well, once you integrate XDR, it can start running threat analytics on all the logs that it's collecting from your cloud-based SAL solution, your security analytics and logging solution. What does that achieve? That achieves automatic incidents creation. Everybody knows what XDR is, right? Raise your hands. Right, 4 people. Wow, okay. Right. Everybody else has just been going to parties and not attending any sessions? Right, okay. So it creates incidents for you automatically, starts doing threat hunting for you, passes the incidents across to your next SOC engineer in the life. So if you have a follow the sun model, everybody gets assigned to those incidences, and they keep going through. And then can also push remediation for you, right? With the earlier avatar of XDR, which will not be named because it's end of life, these remediations would have to be created from scratch, right? So you would create these workflows from scratch, but now it does a whole bunch of things on its own, of course, with your approval, but it is very powerful in pushing automation scripts. So when it detects a problem, a threat, powered by Talos also to help you do that threat intelligence hunting, creates an incident, and then it can obviously push remediation down to that device. All right. Now, a big plus of using this with XDR is no SOAR SIEM XDR solution is useful without data to action on, right? So I'm either collecting information from endpoints, trying to identify if there's any malware on your devices anywhere. But with this, you've already bought and paid for the cloud-based logging. So it's just a no-brainer to say, oh, I'm already logging everything. I'm going to move everything and start analyzing what that does too. All right. OK. Jump into multi-cloud defense. Overview of CDO. We'll do a quick overview of MCD. Will not take more than 5 minutes, I hope, so that we can go to the last part. So multi-cloud defense, changing the way you deliver cloud-based security, has 2 things you need to know about. The controller is abstracted from the enforcement point, right? So software-defined security enforcement, which means the controller is SaaS, separate, and the gateways, virtual gateways, get deployed as a platform as a service. What does that mean? It means, again, they get deployed in your AWS, in your Azure, in your GCP instances, right? So BYOL, deploy them in your cloud deployment, and then they become the ingress and the egress protection across your cloud deployments. The applications don't have to be all in the same cloud. You could have apps in AWS trying to go to OCI, and this would still work, right? There are a few enhancements which I wasn't sure I was allowed to tell, so I haven't added them, but talk to me afterwards, and I can tell you those enhancements afterwards too. OK. So big advantage is it can learn tags from your current cloud deployment. So if you're already doing AWS, Azure security, you already have tags assigned to those workloads. It can learn those tags, and you can start creating policies from those tags. You also use tags in your on-premises data center. You also use tags, if you're a Cisco ICE customer, in your access network. All of that can come together when accessing applications in the cloud if you have MCD deployed. How? I'll get into that now. I'm going to skip across this. This is too much. I don't know why I added this. OK. This is less. Nobody got the sarcasm? OK. So this is, I've deployed, or the slide shows that we've deployed the gateways in either the host VNets, host VPCs, or you can create a hub transit VNet or VPC and deploy it in a centralized model. The reason to show this is easily scales. So if you're using Terraform today to roll out your workloads, hey, every Thursday we run a Terraform script. We check to see if the application servers are exhausted, and we add more, right? At the same time, in the same manner, you can add more gateways to wherever you want to deploy them. Yeah. I haven't planted him, by the way. I mean, oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Oh, great question. Yes. So yes, you get to deploy. Are you saying different policies? The question is, does the automation give you the ability to spin up different policies for different regions across different clouds? Yes, absolutely. So including the gateways, the answer is yes. So Terraform, or now if you're you're not using Terraform anymore because somebody acquired them, right? So if you're using a different language, even that's supported, right? But if you are using Terraform, you can plug this directly into your regular updates, and it'll scale, deploy the gateway, deploy the policy, all from within your normal automation workflow. Or if you're using CI/CD on GitHub, even that works. You could plug it into even that. OK. Oh, perfect. So what do the gateways do? The ingress gateway is helpful in doing reverse proxy, IPS IDS, traffic coming into your workload on the cloud, right? Has geolocation enabled, so you can track where the traffic's coming from, and can also identify malicious IPs. The egress is for applications or endpoints, well, mostly applications, in your cloud, responding back to an incoming request, right? So FQDN-based filtering, IPS IDS also, and TLS decryption. This allows me to also do east to west segmentation, right? Anybody uses secure workload? OK. So secure workload kind of does somewhat similar thing, but it's only for segmentation on premises. It doesn't give you all of these different security features, right? But with MCD, if you deploy applications cloud native, hey, I've got Kubernetes running all across my 3 or 4 different clouds. We're trying to go off into the cloud. We're trying to move off of the on-premises DCs completely. Then this is the solution that you need to start adopting. OK. So centralized security model. I'll share the slides later. But the idea is you create one base security VPC. If you've got different branches, transit sites, everybody comes in over an IPsec tunnel, connects to this centralized VPC, right? That's where your gateways are deployed. OK. Distributed model. Hey, I've got finance in the East Coast. I've got delivery on the West Coast. Bad example, but we'll stick with it. And I want the finance to only go straight, send traffic to the VPC where their workloads are hosted. So now I can move the gateways into the spoke VPCs. Now I don't have to do it centrally. Right, perfect. And then, of course, you can do it hybrid as well. If you're not sure, everything comes in to the security VPC, or if you're not sure what the traffic is, but if you are sure, hey, this is my finance traffic, it needs to go to this spoke VPC, then it goes straight to the gateways of that spoke VPC. Yeah, go ahead. Why are they different? So right now, I'll have to kind of push that offline, because that's a bigger But what we saw here is what covers the different features for them, right? Essentially, the biggest difference is, hey, I don't need everything for my outgoing traffic that I might need for my incoming traffic, right? But I can certainly try and answer that offline. All right. So flows that we just talked about, right? Let's say you've got spoke VPC or workloads deployed, and I want that traffic to go out to the internet. Maybe the workload's making an API call to a payment gateway, right? So it goes through the egress gateway, exits the internet out to the internet. Now, if I want, in a distributed model, I could have the same spoke VPC I could have the same egress gateway in that specific spoke VPC because maybe that's the only one that has internet access. The others don't, right? The others just go site-to-site IPsec back to my on-premises DC or branch locations. How many of you use SD-WAN? Oh, perfect. So you could integrate this directly with SD-WAN, right? Deploy a Catalyst 8000V running SD-WAN in your security VPC right there, offloads the traffic from all your branch locations and goes straight to this policy enforcement point. All right. So segmentation is east to west, another big use case. Hey, we don't want workloads in VPC1 and VPC2 talking over certain ports and protocols, so this enforces segmentation for you. Like I said earlier, you can use the native AWS Azure tags to create those policies. Okay. URL domain filtering, same. Now, this is what I was just referring to is site to cloud connectivity. So if this is my data center, I can just drop IPsec straight to the gateway running in my transit VPC, right? Okay, got a few nods. I'm happy with that. I'll move on. All right, so cloud to cloud, ride the cloud backbone, straight IPsec from Azure to GCP or Azure or AWS to Azure without having to offload it to any place else, right? Without having to go through a middle mile, if you will. Okay, last few minutes, and we're in the last few slides. So migration considerations for CDO. Okay, now, the CDO already has the firewall migration tool. Anybody's used that before? Perfect. So the firewall migration tool can take config from any firewall, third party included, right? Company starting with P, company starting with F. It can take the configs off of those firewalls, convert them into Cisco firewall config, and then use the migration tool to onboard that into CDO directly. It's native in the CDO GUI. So I don't have to go run a different tool, do it offline, and bring it in. I could just do it from the GUI itself. Now, things to consider when you're onboarding on-premises ASAs. The ASA version, 8.4 or higher, it's going to use TLS 1.2. If you're running an older ASA on an older code, that doesn't support that, so you might need a secure device connector, which is a VM that you could deploy on-premises, acts like a proxy to let all your on-premises ASAs go connect to CDO. Right? Just another connector. Excellent. Now, make sure that the ASA's management IP is reachable from STC. Pretty obvious. Make sure the ASA's config is no more than 4.5 MB. Doesn't work. Even if it's a little bit over, doesn't work. So save the config to the ASA CLI, then go to the flash, and then you can check the file size before you upload it. Right? Perfect. Now, if you are running multiple contexts, if you're doing multiple security contexts on the ASA, they're on the same physical appliance, but as far as the CDO is concerned, these are separate ASAs, separate management IPs. So you need to onboard them separately, right? Same thing if you're doing multiple admin contexts. So even if one super admin context gives CDO access to everything, they'll still show up separately in the CDO inventory, right? Something to watch out for. If you're onboarding high availability devices, you just got to onboard the primary one. Okay. Just onboard the primary one. It'll still show 2 in the inventory, but you just onboard the primary one. Now, if you're doing on-premises FMC, this is the easiest migration. The FMC connects to CDO over port 443. CDO learns all devices that it's managing, learns all the objects, learns all the config, and all the devices start showing up in the inventory dashboard. But the few things are essentially the version, right, that you need to watch out for, and making sure that you create a separate account on the on-premises FMC for CDO. Don't use the same admin account. Create a new super admin account. Right? The problem is the devices, the on-premises FMC and CDO both are going to try and log into them, and they won't let you do multiple sessions on the same user login. Right? The ASA or the FTD will kick you out. OK. Lastly, if you had on-premises just threat defense devices, FTDs, not managed by an FMC, those can directly go to CDFMC on the cloud, on CDO, right? Cloud-delivered FMC in CDO. Perfect, yes. So a thing to watch out for is how do you move your analytics and logging over? But we've kind of already covered that at the start. And that's it. I think we have a few minutes left, so we could go back to Q&A. Anybody has any questions? Yeah, go ahead. I'm so sorry. You might have to. I get it. Thursday, everybody's throats are sore. Too many. Oh, thank you. Too many cold drinks. Yeah. Oh, OK. Yes, good question. So let's say we move to the cloud. Now I want to move back on premises, right? So there is config diff. The migration tool will not catch that, in my experience, right? So you would have to manually review the config before you move it on-prem. There are things that might not work. So are you talking about on-premises FMC that's integrated to CDO now? No, no change there. Yeah, no change there. No, yeah. If it's on-premises FMC integrating to CDO, no problem. If the threat defense devices are not being managed by an on-premises FMC, and you move them to, OK, cool, perfect. No, no problem. Anybody else? Awesome. Then that's it's been my time. So please, this is the continue your education slide. So bunch of resources. You could go to ciscolive.com on demand. And please also fill out the survey when you're there. Right? Thank you so much. You've been great. Thank you so much for braving Thursday. Still coming in.